Yeah, I'd love to talk about that, and let me just broaden it slightly. I think what we want when we play is we want variety of sound. Depth of sound, of course, is part of that, and I think depth of sound when we're at the bottom of the cello, that's what people love about the cello. I call it the chocolate, and I'm sure that that's what Sam is talking about. So when we play, we want to be able to float over the top, and we want to be able to vary our sound, and we want to. Depth of sound means going to the bottom of the cello. So if you look at my bow arm, now I'm sort of on the I'm on the surface of the string. Now you should be able to see in my arm, if I release my weight and I sink lower, there's lots and lots of ways to describe that. Flotando is playing on top of the string. Depth, thickness, density is playing under the string or inside the string, right? And what is, I think, really important and not so easy is to be able to differentiate between wanting to get depth by being up here and pushing down on the cello, and you can get to the bottom that way, and actually some steel strings will take that pretty well, but your muscles are tight, your shoulder is up, your agility is blocked because you're a little bit stiff. So if you can do it the other way, which is resting down, like if you've got a cello and you push down, if you've got a cello while you're watching me, push down on the string. Now, take a breath, exhale, and release all your muscles. So you just feel like you're resting. So that's the bottom of the cello. And I might just say that if I was to ask 100 cellists, how do you make a big sound? They would say you use your arm weight. 95 out of 100 would answer that way, but maybe 5 out of that 100 would actually know how to use their arm weight. Most people, or lots of people anyway, have trouble distinguishing, feeling the difference between pressing and resting, pressing and resting. So I think you can try on different strings, you can just try that, actually purposely press down, knowing that that's really not what you want to do. And then a lot of times the exhale helps, and just rest, okay? And if you look at my pressing, usually looks most of the time like this, with straight, stiff fingers and a little higher wrist. When you rest, you'll find if you release your grip and you release your arm muscles, you'll find your fingers naturally collapse. Your wrist straightens out a little bit more. It's not up quite so high. So, hope that's helpful. Another question, Will?
Sure. Question from our YouTube live audience. Left-hand dexterity coming down an arpeggio always trips me up. I feel it's about not nailing the geography of the cello, but I practice slowly. Is there something you would recommend?
Sure. I'm going to recommend it without trying to show you because I haven't been playing the cello. I've been doing cello, like I said, all day long on Cello Bello to try and get all of these resources out to you. But I can certainly talk about it and I can show it here. So I think everybody would agree that shifting up feels more natural than shifting down. It's because when we shift up, we've got gravity, which is helping the hand. Pulling down is going against gravity. And so that's more difficult. So there are different approaches. What I like to do, let's see, I'm going to see if I may have to turn myself here. Let's see if this is helpful. If you take your hand and you can follow your hand up and watch your arm as you go up, you see how your upper arm is coming forward? Your upper arm, this part of the arm is coming forward, and your elbow joint is opening. I'll do that again. So I'm coming up, my upper arm is coming forward, and my arm is opening, right? Okay, when we come down, we tend to just kind of close up like this. Coming down, we have to remember, if we initiate the motion, let's say we're doing an arpeggio like this, but we want to think about pulling the upper arm back. So I think as you come down, if you make sure your upper arm is coming back, and actually feel like you're, different ways to describe it. I think a really great way is to feel like your hand is being pulled down by your back. But if you want to you can think about your hand being pulled down just all the way from the back muscles, or you can think of your hand being pulled down by the upper arm moving down. You can think of your hand being pulled down from the shoulder. There's different ways. You have to try them all and see maybe which one. They should all work. All of those should work. But when you're trying to learn the motion, sometimes thinking of it one way or the other way can help you find it. So the other part of that is when downward scales are also difficult, but we don't have so far to go. But a downward arpeggio is a much longer shift. And I think, I don't remember exactly the wording of the question, but it had something to do with dexterity. So what often happens is you play 3, you play 1, and then you shift, and then you shift. So as you leave your third finger, you can already be moving. So you want to keep your hand in motion, constant motion as much as possible, rather than a series of little jerks. Because when you're on your first finger here and you get all the way down to here, you have to start earlier, right? So it's the anticipation of the motion and the feeling of going up. It's also continuous motion. If you look at my hand, it's just moving all the time. And if you come down, it's also moving all the time. See if you can work that out, and that should help you develop speed in the arpeggios. Another question?
Sure. Question regarding number one. How do you suggest practicing the octave trills on the descending scales in the coda of the Dvorak first movement?
So let's see. Oh, the octaves. I think that must be the.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's 3 versions of that passage in the first place. One is to play the octaves and play the triplet off of the thumb on the D string, and the other is to play the octave, play the triplet up here, and the third version is just to drop the octave and play the passage coming down here on the A string. I can't remember which is the original Dvorak version, but I personally don't think that the passage sounds. Most of the editions seem to have it written on the D string, the triplets on the D string. I don't think that's the most brilliant version. I think it's better to play the triplets on the A string. In other words, you play your octave with your second finger, and then you can play 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 1, and then switch to the next octave here with a second finger. So you're playing your octaves with your second thumb and 2, and coming down that way. I think that's that's a brilliant sounding passage, and if you're not comfortable with it, I think you can drop the thumb. Many cellists are just playing the triplets down the A string. It sounds great. It's hard to imagine that more than 1 in 10,000 listeners is going to even pick up the difference. I don't know if that's a reason to do that or not, but I think in a moment like that, you do the version that sounds best, that's most brilliant. I mean, it's so clear that Dvorak wants brilliance and excitement and virtuosity, so you pick the version that you can pull that off best with. Does that answer the question?
Sure, I think it does. Second question is, do you have any advice for someone who has just started learning the Schumann concerto?
Sure. Let's see, I assume if you've just started, we're talking about first movement. So, I mean, the beauty of the Schumann concerto is the poignancy of it. So, it's getting comfortable with the shifts, and it's finding a sound and a vibrato that has a soulful feeling. Because Schumann, without that sense of soul, doesn't quite work. There are more brilliant concertos, but there are few that are as beautiful. So I would look for the expressive side of the Schumann, and then here and there are some real difficult technical things to negotiate, right? So the first arpeggios up to the top, the second page of the Schumann has some very difficult high shifts. I think I'm saying the obvious, so the question is so difficult. It's a very, the way I would teach that concerto is to have a person play a couple of pages for me and then see where the weaknesses are. Some people will have nailed the notes and haven't found the mood. Some people will have a beautiful first phrase and not be able to play the technical things. So it's very hard for me to advise right now. I think what also works, so when you get into the triplet passages, the triplets change characters very often. Sometimes there's strength in them, sometimes there's lightness in them. So they're not just one bow stroke. So you want to, early on when you're looking at those passages, you want to say to yourself, once I get this learned, even when you can't play it yet, once I can play this, is it light? Is it strong? Is it gutsy? What is it? Because as you're learning it, that way in the back of your mind, you're always looking for the part of the bow that you're going to be in, whether it's an energetic bow or it's a gentle bow, because that really is going to affect your coordination with your left hand. I think that's the best I can do in the most general sense.
Sure. Another question from Linda. When learning a new technique, how should one handle tension that creeps in while focusing on something new or worrisome, like shifting?
When learning a new technique, repeat the question one more time.
Sure. When learning a new technique, how should one handle tension that creeps in while focusing on something new or worrisome, like shifting?
I see. Okay. Well, tension, I think anytime we're dealing with tension, we have to figure out two things. One, where is the tension? Sometimes we can feel that our body is uncomfortable, our body is tense, our arms don't feel good, but we're actually not quite sure where it is or what to do about it. I think that's implied in the question. And then the other part, you use the word worrisome. So the word worrisome indicates to me that the tension can also be a result of being a little anxious or worried. So emotions also cause tension. So there's lots and lots of reasons why it's important not to have a lot of physical tension in our bodies when we play. The agility that we need to move around the instrument gets blocked when we're too tight. But the other thing is, just to go for it, is even when we can play the piece well and then we walk out on stage, there's more tension, right? That's the emotional tension. That's the worrisome word that, or maybe it's not, maybe you're not even worried on stage. Maybe it's just the passion of playing, the excitement of playing, the desire, the will. All of those things can create physical tension. So let's see, the other part of the question was shifting, and I'm going to guess what the questioner was talking about. She said about shifting, and she said worrisome. So I'm imagining that you're going to make a shift and you're worried about hitting the note, right? So there are ways to practice that, first of all. So if you want to there's when you're practicing a shift, I think the first thing you want to do is slow it down and put it on a slur, because what you want to do is you want to be able to feel it. You want to be able to feel the cello. If you get nervous and you just kind of shoot the hand, good chance you're going to miss it. So control of the shift needs to, when you feel you've got control of your hand, and then that takes away some of the worry. So you start by getting the feel of it. Now if the shift comes on a bow change, that's the second step. Keep the shift very slow, but practice the bow change so that you shift, most of the time you shift on the old bow, and you have to coordinate the arrival of the left hand with the right. A psychological trick that many players use is, if you're worried about the left hand, think about the bow. At the moment of the shift, switch your attention to the bow and meeting the left hand. So just not, you always want to hear it, but not thinking about it may help you get rid of the fear. Should. Great violist, maybe one of the great violists of the 20th century, William Primrose. When I was studying with Piatigorsky, Heifetz, Primrose, and Piatigorsky were all teaching at the University of Southern California in those days. So I was lucky to have contact with all of them. And I remember once Primrose was showing a hard shift in the Bartók viola concerto, and he said, you know, whenever I come to this shift, I'm afraid I'm going to miss it. So I do two things. I switch my attention to my left hand, and I pick up my foot and I stomp it. Everybody laughed. And he says, that way, picking up my foot and stomping it gives me confidence, and I usually make it. But if I miss it, I make such a loud noise with my foot, nobody notices. So, try it. Yeah, inject the confidence in the motion. Okay.
Patrick Hopkins asks, do you have any tips for releasing the thumb in the right hand?
Sure. Patrick asks about releasing the thumb in the right hand. So, I have my favorite little ways of doing that, and it's a really important question too, because so many people have trouble with fatigue in their bow grip, and one needs to do with that. So, a couple of things. To go back to the very first question, if you're up here pressing down all of the time, your bow grip's probably going to be tight and squeezing. So just doing that exhale and getting the rest, the feeling of resting, you probably feel some release in the thumb. Okay? But I'm going to the other important part to remember is that once we leave the frog, when we get in the middle of the bow, when we're playing loud, we get in the middle of the bow, we get at the tip of the bow, we have to engage our thumb. There's no way that we can hold onto the bow out here if our thumb is not working, right? So we have to use the moment that the thumb doesn't need to work, which is right when it's on at the frog. So if you've got your cellos, just place the bow right at the frog, right at the heel, not out here. Make sure you're really at the frog, and once you do that, you can take, can you see my thumb? Will, can you see the thumb on the, I think you can. I'm going to turn this way. See if you can, you can practice feeling deep in the cello and taking your thumb on and putting it back, taking it on, playing. I don't recommend it in a concert, but the point is when you come in here, I hope you can see on the screen that I was able to take my thumb actually off of the cello and still play a decent sound. So you don't take your thumb off of the cello, but you think loose. Release my grip. Go limp with my thumb. Yeah. Just at the moment of the change, be courageous and just let go of the thumb all the way at that point. And then, so I like to, I don't know if this is a little bit hard to show, I like to feel like I have people do this. If you hold your thumb up like this and then just gently start to apply pressure. Just gently start to apply pressure and don't let your thumb move. So your thumb is just reacting to what's coming down on it. Now if you release the pressure and come up off of it, you'll feel your thumb not working. So this is when there's no pressure, that's what it feels to me like at the down bow. And now as your down bow, you're in the middle of the bow, now you're going out towards the tip, now your thumb's working at the tip, now you're coming back on an up bow and you feel the thumb loosening and loosening. So as you make this traverse the bow and you come back into the frog, you can feel your thumb giving up little bit by little bit. Right? And when your thumb is loose at the frog, it will automatically give you a little bit of flexibility here, or a lot of flexibility if you need it. Doesn't make any, some people don't believe in a lot of finger motion in the bow changes, and some people believe in more, but nobody believes in being stiff, right? So you can fingers will do what you want them to do if you're not too stiff. Let me just tell one of my favorite stories that all my cello students know, and those of you that have seen the right-hand videos on Cello Bello know. I think it's such an important one though. Many years ago, probably 35 years ago, I was doing Tai Chi, Asian martial arts, and my mentor was 92-year-old little Chinese man that came up to here on me, literally right to here. And he was facing me where I was like this, And he faced me and looked up at me and he said, "Paul, I could kill you, but I won't." And he made me very nervous. And so I said, "Thank you." And then he said, "How do I know that you are weak?" And I said, I don't know. And he said, "Look at your hands. Your thumbs are tight." I thought, what's he talking about? But as soon as he said that, I started to think, hey, this might be a great cello lesson. So I started paying a lot of attention. Then he said, one of the most important things anybody's ever said to me, even though he was a tai chi teacher, he said, when your thumbs are tight, your whole hand is tight. All your fingers are tight. So everybody just hold your hands up like this, stiffen your thumb. And when you loosen your thumb, you'll feel your whole hands go loose, right? That's one of the most important cello lessons I ever had, and I believe that is so critical. So I love the question about how do you release the thumb on the bow, and then because of my Tai Chi teacher, I want to say it's also just as important that the thumb on the back of the neck not be squeezing. As soon as you tighten by squeezing on the back of the neck, you start to block your fingers. So I don't believe in this. That makes your hand unstable, and not only unstable, but just because it's out in the air doesn't mean it's loose. So I think it should be touching the back of the neck so you can feel the cello and belong to the cello. But you want to hang and get depth from above and sink into the cello here, and at the same time keep your thumb on the back of the neck loose. And most cellists have to sort of teach themselves that, because almost every little kid that starts the cello, their hands are small, their hands are weak. So when they first start to play, they get the strings down by squeezing like this. That's what little kids do, right? So then as you get older, you've got to learn. So whoever you are, wherever you are, check out your thumb and see if you can get it going up and down here, but be careful that you're not squeezing, but that you're sinking, that you're hanging into the fingerboard.
Okay, Daniel asks, what physical things do you think about when you want to change between wide/narrow types of vibrato? Is it a different application of weight or other things?
No, these are great questions. Yeah. Okay, so Daniel's asking about how to move from a wide vibrato to a narrow vibrato. So let me start with just a little broader approach to that too. I like to look for as many ways as possible to unify the feelings in both the right and the left hand. We sometimes have to differentiate, but most of the time what we're doing with one hand affects the other. So fortunately, it works extremely well for narrow and wide vibratos, because when do we want a narrow vibrato? We want a narrow vibrato when we're playing soft. So by narrow, I mean narrow amplitude, and by wide, I mean big motion, narrow motion. That's what we're talking about. So a narrow vibrato does not need a lot of depth in the hand. You just need the string down, and you don't need a lot of depth in the bow. You can be floating the bow and feeling minimum pressure or weight in the left hand, right? As you get louder, you need to widen your vibrato. So the amplitude, narrow or wide, is determined by whether you're playing loud or soft. And so if we go back to the first question today, when I talked about how you deeper under the string as you get louder, and the softer playings you feel on top of the string. You can do the same thing here. So this is a narrow vibrato, and as the vibrato gets bigger, you feel deeper and deeper into the fingerboard. So it's so nice. Mother Nature makes all of this stuff work for us. There's another reason that it's important to get deeper as you get wider, because if you don't get deep enough, then your fingers start slipping around, right? So that's not an issue for you when you're doing a very narrow vibrato, but now as you get wider and wider and wider, you have to feel anchored. So you do that not by squeezing with your thumb, but by, I like to say, this isn't a piece of ebony. This is a big black pillow, and I'm just going to sink down in it. And maybe you can feel like you've gone inside the wood that way, if you think of it as a pillow, not a hard piece of wood. There was something else I wanted to add to that. Another kind of important thing that will help, maybe help, if you're trying to get a narrow vibrato, it's good to keep your fingers together. And if you're having trouble opening your vibrato and get it wide enough, get a little more space in your fingers here. It helps free the motion. So you can use the opening and the closing of the hand to help that. You can also use the opening and the closing of the hand to help go faster and slower. When you want to go fast, keeping your hand really together is good. And if you're trying to slow, some people have a really fast vibrato and they need to try and slow it down. Opening your fingers will help slow the vibrato down. Hope that helps.
Jennifer asks, how much of the upward weight of the bow should the little finger of the right hand experience at the frog or when lifting the bow?
I think I understand that. Yeah, that's good. That's also, so I think Jennifer's talking about putting your little finger up on the top of the stick here. And so when we're playing loud and we're down like this, I don't think that the little finger has too much of a function. In fact, I don't like to put my little finger, when I'm playing loud, I'd rather have my finger down here and feel deeper in the bow. But I do think that the little finger, if you're playing very soft, and soft means, I always wind up quoting Piatigorsky, but Piatigorsky used to say, playing the cello is lifting all of your weight off of the cello, resting all of your weight down into the cello, and then he would smile and say, and everything in between. So when we're lifting our weight off, if we're at the frog and we're trying to play double or triple piano, something like that, this end of the bow out here, I guess, I'm not sure if it's on the camera, can feel really heavy, and your bow feels really clumsy in your hand because you're trying to play soft and this thing is weighting you down out at the tip. So that's where this little finger can be very useful in trying to balance that little finger up on the tip there. A little bit of downward motion there can lighten the tip of the bow. You can feel quite comfortable playing very, very soft at the frog. Another question?
Sure. Christian asks, can you talk a little bit about string crossing over a long slur versus a short one, and the role of the shoulder, arm, wrists, and fingers in that motion?
Let's see. Repeat the first part. I'm sorry.
Sure. Christian asks, can you talk a little bit more about string crossing over a long slur?
String crossing.
A short slur?
Okay, string crossings over a long slur versus a short slur. Okay, I guess let me use, if we use that bowing, or maybe that's a good example. I think string crossings basically should be whole arm motions. And not all the time, so I'll modify that in a minute. But for example, on the first three notes of the suite, that should be a whole arm motion that's continuous rather than flipping the hand. Or now when you play, when you're crossing just two strings, and especially if they're faster, we don't necessarily need the whole arm going up and down that way. So then we use more wrist and fingers. And by the way, just to relate it back to what you were just saying, if you don't feel flexibility in your wrist and fingers, and you have trouble making that, the reason is that your thumb is gripping too tight. Remember, when your thumb is tight, your whole hand is tight. So I'm squeezing with my thumb. You can feel how that's jerky, and now I have flexibility in my fingers because I've loosened my thumb. So string crossings are a pretty complex topic, but some of them are whole arm. And look at this. I'm going back to the G strings, and you see how my upper arm, so that's a whole arm motion. So a whole arm motion going up, wrist and fingers, and a whole arm motion going down. So we're constantly combining that. I hope that comes. I hope that's what the questioner was asking. Hope that's helpful.
Jack from Taiwan asks, any advice for young cello players on how to practice and how to best use their practice time?
Hi, Jack from Taiwan. My wife's from Taiwan. I was just in Taiwan a few months ago. I love the country. And you guys are an example to the whole world about how to control this virus. So, how to read that? I'm sorry, read that again? That's also an extremely general question. I need to think of a way to answer that.
Sure. Any advice for young cello players on how to practice and how to best utilize their practice time?
Sure. How best advice to young players as to how to use their practice time? Probably it's the same for everybody, no matter our age or advancement or anything. I think what you want to do at the beginning of every practice session is think about, what do I need to accomplish? And before you even start, okay, what do I need to accomplish? And then have a goal for the practice session. And the goal should not be huge, doesn't have to be huge. You know, there's a saying, expression, something, lots of little steps add up to a very long journey. So you want your practicing to feel good. You want to enjoy your practicing. Right now we're locked in wherever we're locked, all of us. And when we go to the cello and play, let's get some pleasure out of it. But I think even in normal times, we can look at it that way. So what gives us pleasure? Hearing the sound of the cello, playing something that we enjoy, that can give us pleasure. But in terms of practicing, the other thing that gives us pleasure is the feeling that we've accomplished something. That's a great feeling, is to be sitting at the instrument for 15 minutes or half an hour, however it is, and say, I learned that today, right? So you want to have a goal that's realistic, right? You don't want to sit down and say, I'm going to sound like Yo-Yo Ma by the end of this cello practice session, because then you go away feeling, oh darn it, I didn't sound like Yo-Yo Ma today, right? So, but if you say to yourself, let's take the 7-year-old, because we're starting Cello Kids in the next couple of days, right? We're going to have little kids online. So let's say I want to learn the first phrase of Go Tell Aunt Rhody, right? You're 7 years old and you sit down and you've never seen that music before, and you work on it, you get the first bar, you get the second bar, third bar, and maybe your practice is over and you put down the cello and you feel good. Mom, I learned how to play the beginning of Go Tell Aunt Rhody, right? That's a great feeling. Okay. At my age, and at anybody's age, take a piece. If I learn the first part of a new piece, or if I say to myself, I want to improve the intonation today, boy, I've been playing that out of tune for the last 3 months. I'm not going to put up with that anymore. I'm going to devote my practice time to getting that in tune, and I practice it until I get it up to a high standard. I can put down my cello and I can go away feeling really good. So I think that's have goals. Maybe the goals change every day, so that you're fixing this here, you're fixing that here, you're working on different things, but that you always go away feeling good. Then you want to come back to the cello the next day. It's really self-motivating. Then, in addition to that, and I think this is okay for you ask as a young person starting, it's also okay to have long-term goals, right? Not what you're going to do in the next 30 minutes, but what do you want to accomplish this week before your next lesson, you know? So you keep that in mind. Let's see, my teacher gave me a new etude and a new piece of music. I have till next Friday to learn those. So that's a goal that you have to keep in mind, and it helps you organize and plan. So what I do in my teaching is, most of the time when my students come in, I let them perform. I let them play a movement through, or certainly a couple of pages through, because I want them to know when they come for a lesson that they've been doing all this careful practicing, but I expect them to have Humpty Dumpty put back together again. And so if they know that they have to have a certain amount of music ready to play, it makes them practice differently. If they think I'm going to stop them every 2 measures, which I sometimes do, but usually I do that after they can really play the piece, and I'm just working on detail, then I start getting really fussy, and and when you really know that, to answer your question, when you really know a piece well, then you can start getting fussy and fixing little things here and there, and those little things that you're fixing give you that sense of accomplishment. When you're just starting a piece, maybe you want to get the whole piece off the ground, and that gives you your sense of accomplishment. So practicing, to the person that asked the question, practicing always changes. It's never the same, because every day you're going to be looking for something different. As you go through life, as you grow up, as you get more experience as a cellist, what you need always changes. So you always ask yourself, what do I need? What do I need? What can I fix? What can I fix in one day? What can I fix in a week? What's my goal for the next 3 months? You can have all these goals that you're working to that help motivate and kind of keep you on a straight path. Okay, well.
Next question is, how do you prevent one from hunching over while the left hand is up high on the cello?
Oh, okay, that's a great question too, yeah. I mean, especially maybe not when we're young, I guess maybe everybody, we have this tendency to follow our fingers with our head, like that. So we get up there like that, and we're looking like we're looking for C, we're looking for D. Where is it? I don't see anything. So actually looking at the fingerboard actually doesn't help us. What tells us where those notes are is our ear. So when we go up, my ear told me where to stop my finger, not my eyes, right? So there's different ways to break that. I think one of my favorite ways is to tell people to put an airline mask on and practice. So if you've got that mask on, then your eyes can't see anything, and that's a really good way to keep your head up. In general, your head, you want to have your head, even in first position, you want to not be like this. You want to be up and have a good posture. So I like to tell people when they're playing oboes to swivel their head, to rotate their head and feel that their neck is free. That will help you find a balance point for your head. Because if your neck is down like this and you try and turn your head, it doesn't turn very easily. So that helps you have a posture. And another nice little exercise, let's see if I can show you, is to maybe purposely start, just for this exercise, not for playing in general, start in first position, kind of down and slouched, and then make a shift. So as you shift up, you raise your body. So instead of following your hands, you're doing the opposite, right? You can even shift and look at the ceiling. Yeah, so that's really good physically, and it also teaches you, following our hands up here, it's a psychological crutch. It doesn't help, but we get so used to it, we cannot get rid of it. So doing this and looking up at the ceiling and nailing the note, it gives you confidence that you don't need your eyes, and then playing with the mask will also help you do that. Okay.
Sorry, a request. Could you move a foot to your right, your downmost side?
Yep.
Just to get a second. Yeah.
Is that better?
I should see it in a bit. Yeah, should be better.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Hello, do you have any advice for a beginner student who has difficulty playing for a teacher when, contrary to that, in practice, there are few errors? It is very frustrating as a teacher.
Is this the teacher asking, or is it the student asking?
This is a teacher asking for a student.
Oh, I see. Well, that's also a tough answer. You have to, I guess, as a teacher, when I have a student that's having trouble, I want to ask myself, what is the problem? Why? So a kid might come in and not be able to play something because they're very nervous for you. I mean, that's one typical thing. I think another is maybe when they come to play for you, they're more aware of their little mistakes. When they're home playing, they're just playing and they're not noticing these things. So how to deal with that is probably more just being tuned in on the person and what they need. Piatigorsky used, I don't know if this is helpful, but I've thought about it often in my teaching. Piatigorsky used to tell us about, I can actually tell you the name of the person, although some of you may know the name, a fantastic cellist, a very young cellist by the name of Robert Lamarckina. He was the principal cellist of the LA Philharmonic for a number of years, and he died very young, and so this goes back many, many years. But I think when he was a student at Curtis, he would come in and play for Piatigorsky. and he was extraordinarily nervous. And Piatigorsky was always trying to inspire him. So Lamarckino would play something, and Piatigorsky would say, "No, no, no, Bobby, like this," and then he would play it, and he would sound like a god. And then Bobby Lamarckino played it again and almost was worse. You know, he got so intimidated by this wonderful cello playing that it didn't seem to be helpful. So one day Piatigorsky got this idea, and he said, "No, no, Bobby, not like that." And then he took the cello and he purposely screwed it up. And he saw this big smile light up on his student's face, and he sat down and he played it better than he'd ever played it before. So I think it's good that, of course, your students are going to look up to you and they're going to admire you, but it's also good to let them know that you're human, that everybody has trouble. No matter what level we're at, we have trouble. I mean, so maybe let your students know that mistakes are okay. You know, accidents are okay. Of course, we want to fix them, but you know, one of my favorite expressions is the only real mistake is a mistake that you don't learn from. We all need to make mistakes. We all need to fall down, and then when we get up, we can learn from it so it doesn't happen again. So mistakes are part of playing. It's why I tell my older students not to use beta blockers and stuff such as that. It's fine. Get up in cello class and be nervous and have an accident, and when you are nervous and you have an accident, it sort of tells you in a way what your weaknesses are and what you need to work on. And that's learning from your mistakes. So if it's a very young student and they can't play something, you say, you have to figure out first why that is. Like, oh, I was helping somebody very young very recently. I don't do that a lot, but I was very recently, and they were stopping all of the time. And I realized, or I took a guess at it anyway, but I realized that their eyes weren't looking ahead. So they were sort of playing the note that they were looking at, and then they had to stop frequently because it takes a little bit of time. You know, you look and you see what's on the page, and then your brain has to tell your hands and your fingers what to do. So I like to tell young students at an early age actually to already be looking a little bit in front of where you're playing, and that and sometimes I'll take a sheet of paper and I'll just move the sheet of paper across the page while the student is playing, and I'll keep the notes that they're playing, I keep covered so that I'm forcing their eyes to be in front of their hands. And that really can help continuity, I found. So that doesn't mean it helps everybody. To the teacher again, you have to figure out what the problem is, and then you can approach it that way. Okay, another one.
Okay.
So many good questions today. I'm really impressed.
Seiko asks, continuous vibrato has been a great challenge for me. Could you advise how one can achieve this without compromising intonation when playing moderate to fast speed passages?
Sure. So, a few steps to that. One, you want to have a hand position. A hand position where the motion, as you go from finger to finger, the motion is the same. So if you're switching your hand around like that when you're going from finger to finger, it's hard to make the vibrato continuous. But I have a lesson on the website called Continuous Vibrato. I got a lot of vibrato exercises up there. That's probably the subject I cover the best. So like earlier in the conversation, somebody asked about narrow and wide. I've got a vibrato lesson up there, vibrato wide and narrow. I've got another one, vibrato wide and fast. I have one vibrato, continuous vibrato. Continuous vibrato, by the way, might be the most viewed lesson. I guess that's a very common problem. Here's the way I learned it anyway. I learned it to go very slow, and then at the top of the oscillation to put down the next finger, and then on the way down you catch the bottom. So you just keep the motion very slow, but you learn to catch the finger at the right time. I find another way, which is, I think that's really worth practicing. I think that's excellent. But I find, at least with my more advanced students, that a quicker way that very often helps is to have a vibrato. So one of the first things you want to be aware of is, where is that vibrato motion coming from? What initiates it? And I like to point out that it comes right back here from your elbow. So your vibrato motion is actually a forearm motion. We often think about it in the finger, but it's not just in the finger, it's the arm. So if we are vibrating with our arm, so I just take my brain, my mental awareness, and I put it on my arm, so it's concentrating on the arm motion, and I just concentrate on keeping my arm motion. I don't even allow my brain to think about, now I'm going to third finger, now I'm going to fourth finger. That's not even kind of up here. I just am doing it. And all of the time that I'm doing it, I'm thinking about keeping the motion consistent back here. Hope that helps.
Sure. Question from our YouTube live audience. What are some great warm-up right hand exercises?
What are some great right hand warm-up exercises? Well, like everything else, it depends what you need, you know. But in general, I think when you sit at the cello early in the morning for the first time, I think the most general thing you want to say is, good morning, friend. Glad to meet you again. How are you feeling today? And you want to get in touch with your instrument. You know, you want to just draw a few notes. Most of you know that as we go through the different seasons and hot rooms and cold rooms and all of that, the cello feels a little bit different. So if each day when you sit down, let's say you want to start and play some whole bows, then you say, what does the cello feel like today? How do I get my best sound? So, and you're getting the feel of the instrument, but you're also using your ears to look for beauty. You're getting in touch with the feel and the sound of the instrument. If you feel a little bit cold and tight, you can try some moderately fast notes near the frog just to loosen up your grip, so it's not tight like that. But as I say, it depends what you need, right? If you are playing and you feel a bit that you're losing your sound at the tip, you want to make sure you're rolling your weight out to the tip so that you hold the string. You can practice some of the things we were talking about. You can practice string crossings. Maybe part of your warm-up has to do with, like, what piece are you playing and what do you need? Maybe you're going to be going to something that needs a spiccato. So just before you get to the piece, you use your warm-up to get your spiccato going. Maybe it's not bouncing today, and so you have to work on it till it comes back for you. Or maybe you're trying to correct. Maybe your teacher told you that when you. I hope my right arm is my right arm in the picture.
Yes.
Okay. So what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that is I'm playing fast with my whole arm. And you can see that there's something wrong physically with that. That looks really difficult. So if you're going to be playing fast notes, you want to work maybe on your making your forearm a hinge so that you're... See, there's it's like I asked the young boy answered the young boy from Taiwan just a little while ago. It's ask yourself what you need. What are my weaknesses in my bow arm? And then sort of before you start to play pieces, do some exercises for those weaknesses. And then what kind of bow strokes am I going to need in the pieces I'm going to play? And maybe you try a few of those. So that will help you warm up for the pieces.
Great. Someone is asking about what the proper left-hand position is when you're playing octaves from first position to higher up, in terms of what the angle of the thumb is, the angle of the elbow, shape of the hand, the third finger, and where the other fingers are in relation.
Okay, so your octave position is your basic structure, your basic frame for everything you do in thumb position, right? So you want to be able to play an in-tune scale inside of the octave, right? And then as you go up, you can try the in-tune scale again, and your frame stays the same as you go up and down. A couple other things that are ideal, as close as you can get them, is the thumb should be making a good fifth across here, because that really helps your intonation. If you can count on those, you can count on that fifth. So you don't want to be around like this with your fifth off, and you don't want to be back here either. So now this is hard. So let me say one other thing about thumb position. I talk so much about relaxation and releasing tension, and I even go so far as to say we need very little muscle when we're playing. We do need muscle, but we don't need as much as we think we do. But this guy on the left hand, he does fatigue out, especially for young players. And I think the reason is, if you just take your right and your left hand right now, take your left hand and press down like that. This muscle right here, it's a pretty big muscle, it's a strong muscle, but we never use it for anything. Isn't that curious? I mean, if you think about life in general, when do we ever press down with our thumb like that? We never do it. So I think it's a muscle that's not particularly developed. So I think it's important to get your structure right, which means flat wrist, straight fifths, rounded fingers, and then just hang out there. And don't press down too hard, but make sure that the strings are down. And see how long it takes before you start to fatigue out. You can do the same thing. You can take your cello and just hang your hand on the cello like this. Nobody's in school now, but what I tell people when you're in school, when you're sitting in English class, you can just hang out on your desk like that and strengthen your thumb a little bit. So you can build that muscle quite strong, but you have to do it. Don't get too aggressive with it, because you can also hurt it. But if you are doing that 15, 20 times a day, just for 30 seconds or a minute, over a couple of weeks, your thumb will feel much, much stronger. And you don't want to have too much bend in your, let's see, you don't want to have, I don't know if you can see it. You don't want to bend your wrist too much. Like that. You want to have your thumb should be as much of a natural extension of your wrist as possible. That's when it's strong. When you bend it like this, it also makes it weak. So, yeah, so then as you follow, see that goes. This goes back to one of the first questions. See how my upper arm is coming along, like opening my upper arm, and now I'm closing my upper arm. I can keep the whole structure the same up and down the cello. So one of the most important things that Janos Starker used to teach is that the angle of the fingers here should never change. Wherever you are on the cello, they should go up and down without changing. So that goes without the thumb too. So if I'm in a lower position like this, and I'm going up, and now I add the thumb, see, I've organized my hand, now I'm coming out of thumb position, but I've organized my hand so I have the same angle of the fingers. If you're playing like this, and then you're changing here, and then it starts to get more and more out of whack as you go along, then you haven't come around enough. So you can do that in front of a mirror, and it can be very helpful in terms of organizing your hand.
One more question. How do you strengthen the third finger? I'm guessing it's on the left hand?
Okay, well, I guess how do you strengthen any finger? Maybe you can... some people, when they say about strengthening the third finger, it's because, like up here, the knuckle is collapsing. Other than that, most people are asking about the pinky. But you know, here's what I really strongly believe. I mean, little kids, when they start, that's an issue. Not enough strength in the fingers. Sometimes not enough callus on the string. So even putting down the string can hurt a little, right? And then they squeeze, and then they get into... So the teacher has to be very careful about that. But by the time you have grown a little bit, I really believe that this idea of strengthening fingers is not a good idea. Somehow strengthening fingers always turns into tightening the hand. So what I believe is that if you're playing the cello a couple of hours a day, minimum of 2 hours a day, if you're playing the cello 2 hours a day, and most people by the time they get in high school and college are playing more than that, and certainly professionals are, your fingers are automatically strong enough. Just from the action of playing around, they're not going to be weak. If they're weak, it's probably for some other reason, like if your fingers are too flat like this, they can be weak here. A curve in the fingers gives them strength. So you want to find the best position for your fingers. But after that, it's a lot of times when a person feels their fingers are weak, it's because they're tight for so long that they start to fatigue out. So that's with the bow hand too. If you're holding your bow too long and you feel, the biggest mistake people make is, oh, I'm not strong enough, I have to make myself stronger. And basically what they're doing, it's not that they're not strong enough, it's just that they're so tight that the muscles are giving out on them. So I think what's important is that every time you put a finger down, release, release, release. Once the finger's down, you don't need to hold it like that, right? It's going to feel weak after. So you might even experiment with how little weight or pressure you need. Actually, once you put so I like to lift the fingers and throw them, because a little bit of height and speed replaces the need for muscle. And I think in the end, there's more agility in that, just by being loose and tossing the hand. And that should make things feel, most people when I have them throw their finger, and I believe in this motion so that you're not just lifting your finger like this, but hope you can see in my left forearm, there's a little bit of rotation there, so I'm lifting my finger back from my elbow and tossing it. And one of the greatest piano pedagogues in the world, Leon Fleischer, wonderful artist, and he's taught so many of the great pianists of today. I heard him giving a master class on the piano, and he was telling somebody, he said, don't play the piano from your fingers, because some fingers are strong and some fingers are weak, right? Play the piano from your forearm. Because when you play from your forearm, every finger has equal strength. I think it's exactly the same on the cello. You have that little bit of rotation, and you throw your fingers, and that forearm gives a lot of strength to my fourth finger. And as I said at the beginning, I'm confessing here, I really haven't played the cello now for weeks, because I've been doing I've been quarantined and there's no concerts, and I'm working on Cello Bello for you guys all day long. So, but my fourth finger still has strength. I think you can hear some pop. And it's not because my fourth finger is so strong, it's because this reflex muscle is giving it the strength that it needs.
Okay, there's still dozens of questions left, but I was wondering how many you would like to take.
I have no idea what time it is.
It's 2:24.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm delighted. I know everybody's shut up and in their homes, and why don't we go till the half hour point and get as many questions in as possible. I'm so happy that this is being useful to people.
Okay, Lucas asks, I would like to know if you have any thoughts on how to play fast détaché notes on the C string. For me, they sound very unclear and imprecise.
For all of us, Lucas. Yeah. Maybe not imprecise, but it is hard to get clarity. So, a few things. Every cello is different. There's so many things that you need to do. You might have the wrong kind of string on your cello. If it's like if the bridge is high and there's a lot of tension in that string, you might not be able to get to especially if it's loud, and opening of the Prokofiev second moment. So you need to get some downward weight and not pressure. Downward weight. And when you're playing fast, I hope you can see I'm going to move my contact point around. You find the place on the string where your cello seems to respond best. And then that string is so thick that you have to know that because it's so thick, it needs weight and not too much motion. You can play with a lot of bow up on the A string, but if you play with too much bow down on the C string, that string may not speak for you. So concentrate the motion, try and find a downward sinking in force rather than a pressing in force. And the other thing that will block that is if you're so intent on is that your fingers are tight. So you can see that my fingers have some motion here. If they're tight like this, then you can't get under the string, and that makes a lot of noise. Another question?
Sure. Beverly asks, how do you know if you need a bent Endpin? I can't seem to get my cello placed so I don't have to bend my head to keep it out of the way of the pegs.
Oh, I see. Well, I played on a bent Endpin for probably 40 years. And half of my students play with one and half of them don't. So when I'm helping a student decide whether a bent Endpin or not, for me the most important thing to consider is how big is the person. If a person's very tall and they have their knees sticking out in front of the cello and they've got very long arms, a bent Endpin will almost always help them. Because what a bent Endpin does is it takes the cello a little bit further away. So if your arm is too long and you play here instead of here, you can feel more comfortable. And the idea of a bent Endpin is to flatten the cello. So that's the other thing that really appeals to me. Because when your cello, actually Rostropovich used to play like this for a few years, actually with the cello almost this flat. Right now I've just got it resting on my knees. But when you have a flat cello like this, you can really feel gravity. And then the more vertical your cello gets, the more you have to press in, and you can't capture gravity going to the floor. So some gentle lifting of the bottom of the cello can be very, very helpful. Now, people with short arms and short knees, if they do too much of this, then they have to lift their shoulders up in order to play, and it doesn't work, and it's not necessary. If you're short, you can experiment with just lengthening your Endpin and trying to get the cello up a little higher like this to flatten it out a little bit. And if you're tall, I think you should definitely experiment with the Stahlhammer pin. The reason I like the Stahlhammer pin is because it's that end pin that goes out and bends, but if you pay $150 for it and you don't like it, you can just also straighten it and just use it straight, so you haven't really lost your money. I'm not sure I got that question quite straight. There was some other part of it. Did I miss? Or does that answer it?
I think that answers it.
Okay.
Yeah. And then one last question is from Rosemary. I'm just learning cello at 63 years old. Any advice? Maybe something that you wish someone had told you when you started?
Well, bravo. First of all, at 63, to be learning anything new. There's nothing more exciting in life. And in some ways, you're going to be able to go faster than a little kid because you have a logical brain, an analytical brain. So you can use that. Just a lot of the things that we're talking about here about how to hold the bow and the angles of your hands. But the real difficulty, of course, as we get older, we lose that incredible flexibility that a child has. Everything is soft and everything moves, and they can fall on the floor and they can do somersaults and tumble, and we don't do those things anymore. And of course, I hope you don't have any arthritis in your hands or fingers, but all of that starts to come as we get older. Actually playing the instrument can be very therapeutic, actually, in terms of keeping agility in your fingers and hands, and you can look at it that way. But I think not being stiff, it's the hardest thing to do as we get older, but it's maybe the most important thing to do, and it's probably what blocks most adult players, people that start late. So I would say you can read go to Cello Bello. There's so many lessons that have to do with releasing tension and hand position. There's blogs on the same, so I would just gobble all of that stuff up so that you get a intellectual understanding of how we play the cello. And then I hope you have a teacher that can help you. If you're, at this time particularly, you might be self-teaching, so you can sit in front of a mirror, you can look at your hand position, you can correct, you can do a million things that a child can't do. When we're teaching children, we tend to teach them more intuitively. You know, you don't want to put your finger here and here and here, and you don't want to do this and that. That usually kills a kid's interest. So you get them to play intuitively and love the music, and you can do all of that too, but bring your analytical and logical strengths to your practicing, and you'll see you can really grow.
Okay, I think we're out of time.
Out of time. Okay. I've had so much fun. I'm so happy to see everybody. Those of you that have children that are playing the cello or know somebody that's with kids that are playing the cello, let them know that Cello Kids is going up on the Cello Bello website either later today or tomorrow for sure. And there will be some group Suzuki lessons already, I believe, starting on Monday. Unless we run into a snag, they're going to start on Monday. We're going to have 2 age groups at the beginning, kids 4 to 6 and kids 7 and 9. And they're stuck in the house just like we are. I don't know what they do with all their energy. I can't even imagine. So hopefully, and they'll see other kids. They'll see other kids in the classroom, other kids playing the cello. So I think we've done some tests, and they all find it so exciting that there's somebody in another city that's playing the same piece that they are, and they can talk to them. So I'm really excited about this working. So just go to the website and watch for the announcement of Cello Kids, certainly by tomorrow morning. And then within a couple of weeks, we will add another level of 9 to 11-year-olds. So happy we can do that. And we're keeping up the daily chats for all of you that are older. So, and as you've seen in the schedule, there's so many wonderful cellists, wonderful artists that are contributing their time and doing all of this on a volunteer basis. So everybody that's given a CelloChat and everybody that's going to give a CelloChat, I'm so grateful to you for supporting this, and thank you so much. And thank you all for being here today. Come back again quickly.